सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति। हरिः ओम। अस्मद्गुरुभ्यो नमः। Dear friends, this is Taittiriya Upanishad. So we will be studying Taittiriya Upanishad on the basis of Adi Shankara Bhashya. So before getting into the text, I think it is not out of place to know about the Taittiriya Upanishad and the basic Vedic literature. We know that Taittiriya Upanishad belongs to the Yajurveda and it is Veda. And we know that Veda basically means knowledge because it is derived from the root Vid. And Veda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharvaveda, Rigveda. So these are all various kinds of Veda. But basically, following the Bhashya of Sayanacharya, we find that Vedaha Nama Shabdarashihi. So basically, Veda means heap of words, the group of words, that is Veda. But though in the beginning it was in single word form, Veda Vyasa, he divided them into Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharvaveda. And because of this, the popular name has come, the Chaturveda. That means there are 4 Veda. This is the popular belief. And all these Veda deal with knowledge. And that's why Sayanacharya explains the word Veda that Ishtaprapti Anishtaparihareyo Alaukikam Upayam Yo Vedayati Saha Vedaha. It means that Veda is that kind of knowledge which gives us the solution for Ishtaprapti and Anishthaparihara. That means the solution for the problems of this world and to get whatever we desire for the next world also. That means to get the desired things and to avoid the undesirable things also. The Veda gives us some divine, extraterrestrial and not of this world, that kind of solution it gives us. And we find that all the Vedas, though they deal with the eulogy of the nature, the various powers of the nature, we find that we can get an access to the society of that time, the culture of that time, the language of that time. So this is in a way the door to the past. And from this we can understand what we can do in this birth and what we have to do for the next birth also. So all these topics are dealt with in the Vedic literature. That's why this particular knowledge is called Veda in Sanskrit. And we know Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharvaveda. But the Yajurveda is popularly known for its inclination towards Yajna. Yajus, that basically means that Yaja. Yaja means to worship, to sacrifice, to perform rituals. So this Veda, among all the 4 Vedas, it deals with the Vedic sacrifices. And that's why it is called Yajurveda. And Yajurveda, as we find in the Vedic literature, that in the beginning Yajurveda had about 86 Shakha. But unfortunately, most of the Shakha became extinct. And now we have only 4 popular shakhas. And among the 4 popular branches of Yajurveda, which developed in the Kurukshetra part of North India, only the Taittiriya has become very popular. Katha, Kalapa, Maitrayaniya, these are the other shakhas. But the Taittiriya shakha developed, and especially in the southern part of India, we find the Taittiriya shakha. Now, what is this Taittiriya? It is a part of Yajurveda, of course, because Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharvaveda, so each Veda though it is known as Veda, it has branches again, like Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka, Upanishad. That means each Veda will have its parts, like Samhita. Samhita means the pure mantra part of the Veda. Then we have the Brahmana. Brahmana means the commentary part of the Veda, which explains the practical application of the Vedic mantras. That means how the mantras are to be utilized, how they are to be uttered in a particular performance of a sacrifice. Thus, it connects the sacrifice and the mantra. So, this is the main function of the Brahmana text. And we have Aranyaka part. Aranyaka means that part of the Veda which is fit to be studied in the Aranya. That means a very lonely, secluded place, a very peaceful place. So that part is studied there in Aranya, therefore it is Aranyaka. And at the end of that we have the Upanishadic part. Upanishad means Vedanta, or the last part of the Veda, but it is in fact not the last part. Sometimes it is found within the Brahmana and Aranyaka part also. But traditionally, each Veda is supposed to have the four: Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka and Upanishad. So, on this basis we can understand that, for example, the Yajurveda, it has the Taittiriya Shakha. So, there will be Taittiriya Samhita, Taittiriya Brahmana, Taittiriya Aranyaka and Taittiriya Upanishad. Similarly, anyway, Aitareya Brahmana, Aitareya Aranyaka, Aitareya Upanishad. Similarly, we have other also. Now, coming to this particular Taittiriya Upanishad, we find that Taittiriya Upanishad is the Vedanta part, whereas we have other like Taittiriya Samhita, that is the basic Samhita, and we have Taittiriya Brahmana also, and Taittiriya Aranyaka also, and finally the Taittiriya Upanishad. Now, regarding the name Taittiriya, we find in the history that Tittiri was name of a sage. Tittiri was a sage in the olden days. And when Vyasa Maharshi classified the Veda, divided the Veda into four, and when he gave this knowledge to his four disciples, he gave this Yajurveda to Vaishampayana and Atharvaveda to Sumanta. So this way, and even this Samaveda to Jaimini. So this way, when he distributed the Vedic knowledge, Vaishampayana received the Yajurveda from Vedavyasa Maharshi, and Vaishampayana began teaching this Yajurveda to his disciples. And it is learned that Yajnavalkya was one of his students, and according to another account, Yajnavalkya was a nephew of Vaishampayana Maharshi, and Vaishampayana's elder brother was Tittiri Maharshi. And the tradition goes like this, that Vaishampayana was teaching Yajurveda to Yajnavalkya, and Yajnavalkya was bothering him with many questions and all that. When Vaishampayana was vexed up with his questions, he asked Yajnavalkya to vomit all the knowledge, Vedic knowledge he received from him. And the story says that Yajnavalkya just vomited or gave back all the knowledge he received from Vaishampayana, and that particular residue or the remnant of that knowledge that was taken by Tittiri. And according to one account of the tradition, Tittiri, name of a sage, and according to another tradition, Tittiri was the word given for some birds. Tittiri Pakshi, they are the birds. But the authentic version says that Tittiri was brother of Vaishampayana, elder brother. And Tittiri Maharshi, he came there and he got the knowledge, and that part of the knowledge received from Vaishampayana by Tittiri Maharshi, that became Taittiriya. And Panini Maharshi has given a sutra also, that the Tittiri, Kalapa and all these, the Chan Pratyaya, that is a Pratyaya, and by adding that Pratyaya we derive the word Taittiriya. And now the Tittiri Maharshi started his own tradition that is called Taittiriya, and it is known from history that Taittiriya Maharshi preferred to adhere to the original text. That means the mantra and Brahmana, the Samhita part and the Brahmana part mixed. So he preferred that. That is called the Krishna. Actually, it is the Krishna Yajurveda or the mixed Yajurveda. So he preferred that. But when Yajnavalkya got separated from him, and Yajnavalkya then performed penance for many years, and he pleased the sun god, and the sun god, other name is Vajasani. So he came there, and sun god gave Yajnavalkya another Vedic knowledge which was unknown to Vaishampayana. So the tradition says that Vaishampayana taught something but got back, and Yajnavalkya was rather irritated, and he went on performing the penance, and after performing the penance only, he got the sacred knowledge of Veda from directly the sun god. And Vajasani is the name of the sun god, and therefore this text is called Vajasaneya, which was revealed to the Yajnavalkya Maharshi. And another account also says that Vajasani was name of Yajnavalkya's father. That's what Mahidhara explains, that Vajasani was Yajnavalkya's father, and that's why Yajnavalkya was named as Vajasaneya. So whatever may be the tradition, we have two streams of Yajurveda, Taittiriya and the Vajasaneya. So both belong to the Krishna. And now the part of Krishna, the Yajurveda received by Taittiriya Maharshi was known as Taittiriya, and that received by Yajnavalkya Maharshi was known as Vajasaneya. And the Taittiriya is mixed because it contains the mantra part as well as the Brahmana part. Whereas the part received, the Vedic knowledge received by Yajnavalkya contains, it is separate. The mantra and Brahmana part are separate. Therefore it is pure, and the other one is admixtured. So this way we find some classification also. And now coming to this Taittiriya, now we have understood that the Vedic knowledge, the tradition of Vedic knowledge that has continued in India from Taittiriya Maharshi is known as Taittiriya. And Panini Maharshi says that that particular part of Vedic knowledge studied and continued by disciples is known as Taittiriya. So Taittiriya means that part taught by Taittiriya Maharshi and studied and continued by his disciples is Taittiriya. And now Taittiriya Upanishad. What is this Upanishad? Actually, this Taittiriya Upanishad is part of Taittiriya Aranyaka only. As we had seen earlier, Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka, Upanishad. These are the four texts belong to a particular Veda tradition. So here, Samhita, pure mantra part. Then we have Brahmana explaining the utility of the mantras in sacrifice. Then third we have Aranyaka, the text to be studied in the lonely or secluded place like Aranya. And fourthly we have the Upanishad. So this Taittiriya Upanishad belongs to the Taittiriya Aranyaka only. Taittiriya Aranyaka consists of total 10 Anuvaka. Anuvaka means sections. So there are total 10 sections, Anuvaka. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the first 6 Anuvaka are called the Aranyaka proper, the text, Aranyaka text. Now 7, 8, 9. The 3 Anuvaka are called Taittiriya Upanishad. And the last Anuvaka is called Mahanarayana Upanishad, where we find the popular Mantra Pushpam also. So thus the popular Mantra Pushpam which is recited in the temples also is a part of the Taittiriya Aranyaka. That is the 10th Anuvaka of the Taittiriya Aranyaka. And in between the 7th, 8th, 9th, that is Shikshavalli, Anandavalli and Bhruguvalli, these 3 sections together are called the Taittiriya Upanishad. What is Upanishad? Upanishad, it consists of 3 word blocks. Upa, Ni and Shad. In Sanskrit, Upa means near, Ni means completely, Shad means to sit. So put together all the 3 words mean sitting near a teacher and receiving the knowledge. It is actually the meaning of Upanishad. Why? Because this is considered to be a very sacred and secret knowledge which is not supposed to be given to any person, and especially when a person is not having any control on his senses, that person cannot contain this sacred knowledge. And that's why all the Upanishads uniformly say that the person who wants to get this knowledge should be a very Shanta, Danta, Uparata and Titikshu. This is actually the Adhikari. And now the Taittiriya Upanishad, here also Upanishad, that means this particular part of Taittiriya Aranyaka is regarded in the tradition as Upanishad, very secret and sacred knowledge. Because Shad, the root in this particular word Upanishad, Shad, it is used in three senses: Gati, Visharana, Avasadhana. So Shad means to go, to move. But the same root gives another meaning, that is slackening, annihilating, and Avasadhana, that is destroying also. So we have three different meanings of the same root: Gati, Visharana, Avasadhana. So what does it mean? Shankara Bhagavad-pada explained the word Upanishad in the beginning of this Upanishad and even Kathopanishad also, that Upanishad means that particular knowledge of the Brahman which takes us to higher planes, spiritual planes, which removes our ignorance and which destroys our spiritual blindness and which makes us eligible for that Brahma Anubhava. So because of that particular nature, this text is called Upanishad, and it is Brahma Vidya in fact. And this is the word Taittiriya Upanishad, belonging to the Krishna Yajurveda. And Adi Shankara Acharya began this Taittiriya Upanishad commentary with his Mangala Shloka, or the invocatory verse. We find in the beginning, Yasmad Jatam Jagat Sarvam Yasminneva Praliyate Yenedam Dharyate Chaiva Tasmai Jnanatmane Namaha. He offers his salutations to that pure Brahman who is of the form of Jnanatman. That means who is in the form of Jnana, knowledge. That means the knowledge we get in this body is actually part of the universe. If something called knowledge were not there in the universe itself, so how could it be manifest in this body? So that's why the knowledge I am getting, the knowledge anybody is getting, that is a part of the universe. So the Vedic seers look at the universe as a whole, a unit, a single unit. They don't see any fragments there. And that's why Jnana, which is manifesting itself in various forms, in all the animals, human beings, everybody. So that Jnana is the very nature of that Brahman, the cosmic reality or energy. And now Adi Shankaracharya pays his homage to that Jnana Swarupi Brahma. He says, Yasmad Jatam Jagat Sarvam Yasminneva Praliyate Yena Idam Dharyate Chaiva. So here we find that kind of Brahma. It's actually the Tatastha Lakshana of Brahma, that the Srushti, Sthiti, Samhara, the creation, the support or sustenance and destruction of the world, they are caused by the Brahman. So the Brahman creates the world, sustains the world and destroys it. Or in a way it is not destruction, but in a way it is actually withdrawing the universe within himself. That is, the manifest world merges into the Brahman only. So that Brahman is looked upon here as the soul, pure, the one Brahman. And now the nature of that Brahman is Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam. So Jnana is the very nature of that Brahman, very nature of this cosmic reality. And Shankaracharya offers his salutations and says, Tasmai Jnanatmane Namaha. My salutations are to that Jnanarupi Brahma, or the Brahman in the form of knowledge. Secondly, he says, Yairime Gurubhis Purvam Padavakya Pramanataha Vyakhyataha Sarva Vedantaha Tan Nityam Pranatosmyaham Aham Tan Nityam Pranataha Asmi. He says that I am going to the great revered teachers always, who padavakya pramanatah sarva vedantaah vyakhyataah purvam. So those teachers who commented upon all the Vedanta, all the Vedanta means all the Upanishads, by pada vakya pramana, that means my predecessors, the old teachers who commented upon all the Upanishads word by word and sentence by sentence, showing all the necessary proofs there, all the logic there. So my salutations are to those teachers also who commented upon all the Upanishads and gave us the sacred knowledge in the form of their bhashya. And Shankaracharya acknowledges here that his bhashya is also a result of the inspiration he received from those earlier commentaries, and at places he makes references to those commentaries also. And he says, Taitiriyaka sarasya mayacharya prasadatah vispashtartha ruchinam hi vyakheyam sampraniyate. He says, by the grace of my teachers, whatever essence I got from this Upanishad, and on that I make a commentary here, vispashta artha ruchinam hi, for the people who want to get the taste of a clear, lucid commentary. So here I am providing a lucid commentary on that Taitiriyaka part for those people who want to relish the taste of this Upanishad Sara, and this I am accomplishing by the grace of my teachers. So thus he prays to the Brahman, then to his teachers, and acknowledges that his commentary is based upon the teaching he received from his teachers, and he now continues his Taitiriyaka Bhashya. Now we find the Taitiriyaka Upanishad, it is in 3 parts, as we found earlier. 7th, 8th, 9th chapters of the Taitiriyaka Aranyaka are called Taittiriya Upanishad. So 7th chapter, 8th chapter, 9th chapter, the 3 are there, and traditionally they are called Shikshavalli, Anandavalli or Brahmanandavalli, and lastly Bhruguvalli. There are 3 chapters in this Taittiriya Upanishad, and the first Shikshavalli has some 12 small sections, and second Anandavalli has 9 such small sections, and Bhruguvalli has 10 sections. So thus in total we find total 31 small sections in the Taittiriya Upanishad. And now Shankaracharya begins his Bhashya. He says, Nityani adhigatani karmani upatta durita kshayarthani kamyani cha phalarthinam purvasmin granthe. Now, before this particular Upanishad part, in the Aranyaka and Brahmana part also we had seen the Karma Kanda part. That means each Veda has different sections. Some section dealing with the Vedic rituals called Karma Kanda. Some sections dealing with the worship and meditation contemplation, that is called Upasana Kanda. And there is another Kanda which is known as Jnana Kanda, the part dealing with the knowledge, realization of self and the Brahman also. So there are 3 Kanda. Now Shankaracharya explains that in the Purvasmin Granthe, the earlier Kanda, Nityani Adhigatani Karmani Upatta Durita Kshayarthani. That means various Vedic rituals we had understood from the previous chapters which can remove our sins. That means basically such kind of Nitya Karma are performed to get rid of these sins only. Idanim karma upadana hetu pariharaya brahma vidya prastuyate. He very logically and intelligently connects this Upanishad. He says, okay, to get rid of the karma and karma phala, that particular Nitya Karma is prescribed, and the entire exposition of Nitya Karma we have understood. But the basic question arises, why is a person indulged in the karma? Why does a person perform karma? Keneshitam patati preshitam manaha. The Kenopanishad also says, What is the source of this? What is the motive behind this? And what is actually propelling person to indulge in the action? Whether it is nitya karma, naimitya karma, whatever it may be. So what does encourage him to perform such karma? So that is karma upadana hetu. That means the basic reason behind performing karma. So that pariharaya. So not to get rid of karma, not to get rid of just its result, but to get rid of the basic cause of karma, that is avidya. Idanim Brahma Vidya prastuyate. Now the Brahma Vidya, that means the knowledge of the Brahman, is being commenced. Now we find here two separate statements. One, the karma is performed to get to get fulfilled all our desires, all that, and to get rid of sins also. Now, one can get rid of karma and karma phala by performing such karma. But what about the karma upadana? What about the cause of karma? How to get rid of that also? How to remove that from our mind? And how to be free from all kind of ignorance? That is possible only with the help of this Brahma Vidya. That means when a person realizes the Brahma, then only he can be free from all karma and its phala also. And for that purpose only Shankaracharya here connects this text and says, this Brahma Vidya prastuyate, that means this exposition of Brahma begins to enable us to get rid of that karma upadana bhuta avidya, that is the ignorance. Karma hetuhu kamaha syat. Now Adi Shankara explains, karma hetuhu kamaha syat. So what is the cause of this karma? Why do I perform a particular karma? Whether it is nitya puja, whether it is naimittika karma, why do I do? The reason is kamaha, my desire to get something, or my desire to get rid of something. So either to get something or to get rid of something, I perform karma. So that's why kamaha is the reason behind this karma. Pravartakatvad. Because kamaha, that only propels, that only encourages a person to perform a karma. Apta kamanam hi kama bhave swatmanya avasthanat pravrutti anupapattihi. There are other people also. They are not kaminaha. Kaminaha are the people who have a desire and who want to perform karma and get the result also. But on the other hand, we have apta kama. Apta kama means self-content. Those who have realized everything, those who have got their desires fulfilled and they don't have any desire at all, they are the apta kama. And apta kama nam hi kama bhave. Because everything is fulfilled, because they have realized the soul, realized the Brahman, that's why kamanam abhave. They don't have any desire at all. And therefore, swatmani avasthanat. And that kind of the perfect souls, they remain in their pure self. That means they are not brought out, they are not extrovert. They are always established in the pure form called self. And pravrutti anupapattihi. Naturally, when a person is self-established, when a person is content, then he is not carried away by either by the Vedic rituals or by other karma. So that's why he is not carried away. Pravrutti anupapattihi. There will not be any kind of indulgence in action. Atmakamitvecha apta kamata. Apta kamitvecha apta kamata. So we understand here apta kamata. That means the desire is fulfilled. Apta kami. So he doesn't desire anything further. And atma cha brahma. This is the summum bonum of all the Upanishadic philosophy. This is the essence of Advaita. Atma hi Brahma. The soul, the individual self, is verily the Brahman, the cosmic reality. I am verily that reality. And all the other which perish, they are only conditions and they are separated, and I as pure consciousness remain as pure Brahman. So this Atma hi Brahma, that shows that when a person becomes introvert, and when a person gets established in the pure self, then there will not be any desire, because the Upanishad also says, the Ishavasya Upanishad also says that ko moha kashokaha ekatvam anupashyataha. When a person perceives oneness everywhere, and when he realizes the entire universe as single reality, then he will not have any either kama or krodha or moha or shoka. So this Atmani Avasthanam, or being established in the Brahman, is stressed here. And Shankaracharya says, Tadvidahi parapraptim vakshati. Tadvidaha hi. That means tadvit. Tadvit means one who realizes the individual self as Brahman. He is actually Atmavit. Tadvidohi parapraptim vakshati. So the Upanishad is going to explain us that the person who is established in his pure self is able to get that para, the absolute, the highest reality. So he alone can get it, and that's why the means and the goal both are explained here. Ataha avidya nivruttau. For this reason only, because the self is dearest of all. Ataha avidya nivruttau. When this ignorance is removed, what kind of ignorance? Identifying ourselves with body, mind, senses, intellect, etc. This is actually the spiritual ignorance. And avidya nivruttau, when this ignorance is removed with the help of this Upanishad only, that means everywhere Shankaracharya emphatically says that Upanishadic knowledge alone is the true knowledge, and it alone can take us up. It alone can remove that ignorance and make us eligible for that Brahma Bhava. So he says here, avidya nivruttau, when a person realizes the Brahman and the ignorance is removed, swatmani avasthanam, he remains in his pure self, and that is called paraprapti. This is actually the paraprapti, or attaining the highest reality. Abhayam pratishtham vindate. So this Taittiriya Upanishad is going to say Abhayam Pratishtham Vindate, because Dvitiyadvai Bhayam Bhavati. The Upanishad says that Dvitiyadvai Bhayam Bhavati. That means a person gets the Bhaya. That means he is afraid of something. He gets that fear. What kind of fear? Among all kinds of fears, only the dangerous one is fear of death. And when one realizes this entire universe as one reality, there is abhaya. That's why the Upanishad says abhayam vai janaka praptosi. It says, because you are a realized person, because you have realized the Brahman, abhayam praptahasi. Now you have become fearless, and that fearlessness itself is the Brahman. And pratishtham vindate. So a person who realizes the individual self as the Brahman, as the cosmic reality, he attains both. They are only the two sides of same thing. That is, one, fearlessness. That means he is not afraid of death, because he realizes what gets death and what doesn't get. And second thing, pratishtha, a full establishment, complete absorption in the Brahman. So these two are there, and these two are achieved by a person only when this kind of realization takes place. Second, etam anandamayam atmanam upasankramati ityadi shrutehe. And now when he raises himself from the lower planes to the higher planes, annamaya, pranamaya, manomaya, vijnanamaya, so he raises himself to the highest plane, that is called anandamaya. Etam anandamayam atmanam upasankramati. So ultimately he reaches that kind of his own self, that is anandamaya, blissful. It is his own self. It is not different. But the thing is, realizing and experiencing that particular plane is mentioned here. So the person raises himself from annamaya, the physical level, to the anandamaya, the blissful level, and there he becomes one with the Brahman. Now the mimamsaka, that means the the persons who follow the Karma Kanda part, the persons who follow the Mimamsa part, they argue, their argument is also presented here. Kamya pratishiddhayoho anarambhat arabdhasya cha upabhogena kshayat nityanushthanena pratyavaya abhavat ayatnataha eva swatmanyavasthanam mokshaha. This is where their contention. They say Kamya pratishiddhayoho anarambhat. Okay, we'll do one thing. Kamya and pratishiddha, these are two kinds of karma. Kamya karma means whatever I desire. That is Swarga kamo yajeta, Pashu kamo yajeta, Darsha Purnamaasabhyam yajeta, etc. Whatever injunctions are there in the Vedas. They are Vedic injunctions like for this particular purpose, for this particular result, you perform this sacrifice. These are called Kamya karma. And the Veda only contains some such sentences, prohibitive sentences, like if you want this particular result, so you desist from this kind of karma. That means don't indulge in this kind of karma. Don't do this. Do this, that is Kamya karma. Don't do this. This is Nishiddha karma. So two kinds of karma are there. Now Mimamsaka argue that we should not start either Kamya karma or Nishiddha karma. Then Arabdhasya cha upabhogena. So what about the karma that has begun now? That means we have taken a body and now we are in the body and we are supposed to experience many things till death. So this is called Arabdha karma. What about this Arabdha karma? The karma which is begun. Now they argue that upabhogena. Okay, whatever is begun, we have to experience that. So whatever sukha, dukkha, happiness or sorrow, whatever it is, we have to enjoy, experience and proceed. So this way, Kamya, Nishiddha, then Arabdha karma we have understood. Then Kshayat, that way we can get rid of the Arabdha karma also. So this is by Upabhoga. Kshapayitva, that is by annihilating that karma. Nityanushthanena. What about Nitya karma? Nitya karma means which we are supposed to perform every day without any inclination to the result. That is Nitya karma. So here Nityanushthanena, by performing the Nitya karma, daily rituals, Pratyavaya abhavat. So we can get rid of all obstacles, all unnecessary, unwanted, undesirable things also. So this way we have the karma as the basis of Swatma Avasthana. So the Mimamsakas argue that Ayatnataha eva Swatmani Avasthanam Mokshaha. So without any effort, personal effort also, we can be established in ourselves, we can be as our pure self, and that is moksha. So that's why when this kind of moksha is possible from the performance of all this karma, so why to go for the Advaita exposition here, the Advaita Vyakhyana? And they further argue, Athava Niratishayayaha Pritehe Swarga Shabda Vachyayaha Karma Hetutvat Karmabhya eva mokshaha. So they hold another opinion also, that Karmabhya eva mokshaha, or rather we can say that the moksha or liberation is possible by the performance of karma only. That means we perform our duties, we perform the Vedic rituals, all that, and on the strength of those karma only we can get moksha. How? Because that Niratishaya Priti, it is called Swarga. Swarga kamo ejeta, when Swarga is mentioned there, what is this Swarga? The Mimamsaka say it is Niratishaya Priti. Yanna dukkhena nasambhinnam nachagrastam anantaram. Yat dukkhena nasambhinnam nachagrastam anantaram. Tat sukham swafpadaspadam. They say that Swarga, it consists of two parts. One Swaha and other is Ga. Swaha means that absolute highest bliss. That is Swaha. Niratishaya Priti means which has no other excellent bliss. That is the highest bliss. It is Swaha. And Ga means obtaining that. And Swarga means obtaining the highest bliss. And it is possible by the performance of karma only. And when moksha is possible from karma, why to go for jnana? So that is their contention or the point of argument. Now Adi Shankaracharya answers. He says, "Na." The Mimamsaka's argument is wrong. Karma anekatvat, because the karma you are propounding as a cause of moksha is aneka. It is not of one type. It is manifold. Anekanihi arabdha phalani anarabdha phalani cha aneka janmantara kritani viruddha phalani karmani sambhavanti. Because the karma are found to be multifarious. They are of various kinds. One, arabdha phalani anarabdha phalani cha. So the karma, some have begun yielding their result and some have not yielded their result. Aneka janmantara kritani, and many karma performed in many births, they are also there. Viruddha phalani, and the karma also have the fruit different. Some karma give a different fruit and some other karma give different fruit. This way their result or fruit is also different. And the karma basically are of this type. Ataha, and for this reason, teshu anarabdha phalanam ekasmin janmani upabhoga kshaya asambhavat. It is impossible to realize or experience the fruit of anarabdha karma in this eka janmani, in this birth. So in one single birth, a person cannot enjoy the experience the result of his anarabdha karma. That means the karma not yet begun. Shesha karma nimitta sharira arambha upapattihi, and for the sake of this particular, the remaining karma, he has to take another birth, he has to take another body. Karma shesha sadbhava siddhischa. A very important point here, that karma only decides our rebirth. That means whatever we do in this birth, that will decide our next birth. So this way, karma shesha, that will decide whether a person will take another birth or not. And this is proved by the Shruti itself. Tad ya iha ramaniya charanaha ramaniyam yonim apadyante, etc. The Chandogya Upanishad says that the people who perform meritorious deeds, good deeds, who help others, who serve the society, who perform rituals, so these people are the ramaniya charanaha. That means people of good conduct. They ramaniyam yonim apadyante, so they take birth in noble families, they take good births. And kapuya charanaha, on the contrary, the people of bad conduct, the people of wrong deeds, so naturally they get the lower births also. Now tataha sheshena, the Apastamba Dharma Sutra and Gautama Smriti, etc., they also very assertively say that tatah sheshena, that means the remnant of the karma we perform, that will naturally take us to the next birth. Ityadi Shruti Smriti Shatebhyaha. So on the basis of this kind of hundreds of Shruti and Smriti, the proper Vedic texts and the Smriti texts also, we can conclude that the karma is not consistent. Karma is of various types, and if there is a remnant of karma, then we have to inevitably take next birth also. Ishta anishta phalanam anarabdhanam kshayarthani nityani iti chet. The argument now continues. If anybody says that ishta anishta phalanam anarabdhanam kshayarthani, so if we perform nitya karma in this birth, so we can annihilate the unbegun karma also, which have the ishtaphala or anishtaphala. So we can stop such anarabdha karma also by performing nitya karma in this birth. So if anybody argues in this way, Shankara Bhagavad Pada replies, na. This argument is also not correct, because akarane pratyavaya shravanat, Sandhya Vandana, Agnihotra, so whatever nitya karma is there, the scriptures say very clearly that by performing nitya karma, a person does not get any special benefit, but his pratyavaya, only akarane pratyavaya. That means if he does not do that, he will get some undesirable things. That is the akarane pratyavaya only. Karane nakimapi phalam. So this way it is mentioned there. And what is this pratyavaya? Pratyavaya shabdaha anishta vishayah. Pratyavaya means obstacle, undesired thing. What is that? Anishta vishayah. Whatever we don't like, so we will get it. So this is actually anishta. A person gets it by not doing the nitya karma. Nitya akarana nimittasya pratyavayasya dukkha rupasya. So this pratyavaya is dukkha only. That means whatever we don't want, if we get it, so we become sad. And the Shastra says that we get this dukkha because we do not perform the nitya karma. And agaminaha parihararthani nityani iti abhyupagamat anarabdha phala karma kshayarthani. So this nitya karma agaminaha parihararthani. So they can only stop the agami dukkha. That means they can hinder the future dukkha only, future sorrow. Nityani. So this is the very purpose of the nitya karma. Iti, for this reason, abhyupagamat na anarabdha phala karma kshayarthani. So because the nitya karma cannot stop the present but future pratyavaya only, it can be concluded that the nitya karma cannot destroy the anarabdha karma phala. And now, yedinama anarabdha karma kshayarthani nityani karmani tadhapi ashuddhameva kshapayayuhu na shuddham. And Shankaracharya brings out a logical fallacy here. He says, okay, we understand, for time's sake, we understand that the nitya karma can destroy the anarabdha karma, but they can destroy only the ashuddha karma, not shuddha karma. That means the nitya karma, when performed, can remove the impure deeds only. That what about the pure deeds? What about the meritorious deeds? He says, ashuddhameva kshapayayuhu na shuddham virodha bhavat nahi ishtaphalasya karmanaha shuddharupatvat nityaihi virodha upapadyate. He says there is no virodha at all. There is no contradiction that the nitya karma should destroy the shuddha karma also. He says ishtaphalasya karmanaha shuddharupatvat. What is shuddha? That karma is called shuddha, which gives us the desired fruit. Nityaihi virodha na upapadyate. So naturally the nitya karma should not destroy that kind of shuddha karma also. Shuddha shuddhayorhi virodho yuktaha. Only the shuddha karma should destroy the ashuddha and ashuddha should destroy the shuddha. So there can be a natural contradiction or enmity between shuddha and ashuddha only, not between shuddha and nitya karma. So this is the basic logic here. Nacha karma hetunam kamanam jnana bhave nivritti asambhavat ashesha karma kshaya upapattihi. So without proper knowledge, the desire which propels us to indulge in action cannot be removed. So only by getting that realization, our ignorance is removed, and then all the kama, sarveyasya kama hridisthitaha, so all the desires in the heart, they will be removed. And it is not possible without knowledge. That's what he says. Asambhavat asesha karmakshaya upapattihi na. So the entire karma cannot be destroyed without knowledge, because knowledge only removes kama, and without kama only we can get rid of all the karma. Anatma vidohi kamaha anatma phala vishayatvat. He says, who does long for the fruits of karma? Only anatmavit. That means a person who does not realize his self, who does not realize the cosmic reality called Brahman, that person alone indulges in action. Anatma vidaha. So because he has some desires, because he has some passion also. Swatmanicha kamanupapattihi. But whereas once a person realizes his self, kama anupapattihi, there will not be any desire, because he is the very self. So there is nothing to be desired, there is nothing to be longed for, sought after. So because the self, the longing factor itself is the self. Swayamcha Atma Param Brahma ityuktam. Because earlier it is stated that Swayam Atma Param Brahma. That means the self, the energy passing through the body, the energy which makes a person speak, listen, hear, understand. So that is Param Brahma. That is the absolute self. And that's why when one realizes this fact, there will not be any desire at all. When there is no desire at all, there cannot be any indulgence in any kind of action. That's what Shankaracharya makes clear here. Nityanam cha akaranam abhavaha tataha pratyavaya anupapattihi. So naturally, when a person does not perform any kind of karma, even the nitya karma, tataha pratyavaya anupapattihi. So naturally, there will not be any pratyavaya at all, because the person is established in his pure self. Otherwise, with regard to the common, ordinary, ignorant people, it cannot be said that they should not perform any karma at all. They should perform, because karma is for mental purity. That's what Shankaracharya says everywhere. Very emphatically he says that the performance of karma is for mental purity. So that removes all impurities and makes us pure. And when mind becomes pure, we will be eligible to receive that sacred knowledge, Atma Jnana. And once the Atma is realized as Brahman, that is called moksha. And that's why we cannot say that karma has no fruit at all. It has a fruit. It is called mental purity. Ataha पूर्वोपचित दुरितेभ्यः प्राप्यमाणायाः प्रत्यवाय क्रियायाः नित्य अकरणं लक्षणम् इति अकुर्वन् विहितं कर्म इति शतुः नानुपपत्तिः. He says पूर्व उपचित दुरितेभ्यः प्राप्यमाणायाः प्रत्यवाय क्रियायाः. So why does a person get this obstacle? Purva upachita durita. That means because he has performed some sin, and as a result he is getting this obstacle. So these obstacles are the result of our previous sins only. Nitya akaranam lakshanam. And that's why he is not indulging in the nitya karma. And the Manusmriti also says akurvan vihitam karma. It says that a person not performing the enjoined or the allotted karma gets sin. Not enjoying the karma, he will get sin. And iti shatuhu nanupapattihi. Akurvan, there is shatru pratyaya here. That is the present continuous participle. And it says akurvan prapyate papam. That means vihitam karma akurvan naraha papam prapyate. That means by not doing the prescribed thing, a person gets sin. Anyadha bhavat bhavotpattiriti sarva pramana vyakopa iti. Anyadha bhavat bhavotpattihi iti. Now, otherwise, anyadha abhavat bhavotpattihi. So, when it is split in this way, anyadha abhavat bhavotpattihi. That means, otherwise there will be the reason that abhavat bhavotpattihi. That means something existent is produced from the non-existent thing. So, there should be some existent reason for this also. Iti ataha sarva pramana vyakopaha. So if we take this into account, then sarva pramana vyakopaha, then all the pramana, all the valid proofs will become nullified or invalid. That is the problem there. And that's why we understand that the not performing the nitya karma, that naturally creates obstacle, etc. That is purva upachita durita. That means because of the sin accrued from previous deeds. Yaccha uktam niratishaya pritehe swarga shabda vachyayaha karma nimittatvat karmarabdhayeva moksha iti. Now, Shankara Bhagavad-pada refers to the previous argument of Mimamsaka. One point was raised there, that moksha is not other than getting that absolute and highest bliss called swarga. So it is possible with the help of the karma only, and that's why jnana is of no use. So referring to that particular point, now Shankaracharya says nityatvan mokshasya. He says this your argument is wrong, because moksha in our philosophy, in the Vedanta philosophy also, moksha is nitya, eternal. It is not something to be created. And whatever you propound there, that is something to be created. And that is the basic difference between swarga and moksha, because swarga that is not eternal. That's what Bhagavad Gita also says, that after enjoying particular punya or the remnant of punya, kshine punye, when that particular punya is exhausted, then the person has to come down to this mortal world, has to take other birth, has to take bodies also. So he will remain in the Swargaloka as long as his merit lasts. And once his merit is complete or merit is exhausted, then he has to come down, he has to take birth. So this very clearly shows that Swarga is not permanent, whereas moksha is a permanent thing. There is basic difference between the Swarga and moksha. Nahi nityam kinchid arabhyate. And it is the logic here that no eternal thing can be produced. We cannot produce space, we cannot produce akasha, vayu. These are all eternal. And moksha is also an eternal thing because it is the very nature of the soul. That's why it is not something to be produced. It is not something to be created. That is the difference. Whereas Swarga is something to be attained for some particular period only. And after that period, that Swarga experience also disappears. And Loke yadarabdham tad anityam. This is the logic here. Loke, in the world also we observe that yadarabdham tad anityam. Whatever is begun, whatever is produced, that is anityam, that is perceived as impermanent or non-eternal. Moksha is eternal. Ataha na karmarabdho mokshaha. That's why Shankaracharya concludes here that na karmarabdho mokshaha. That means your contention that moksha can be obtained by the performance of karma is not correct. Because moksha is not something which can be produced by karma, which can be obtained by performing karma, because there is great difference between these two, karma and moksha. Now, Mimamsaka may proceed. They say, Vidya sahitanam karmanam nityarambha samarthyam iti chet. Now, okay, may the single karma be not able to get that moksha. That means, of course, we may not be able to achieve that moksha with the help of karma alone. But Vidya sahita karma, what about the admixture of Vidya and karma? Admixture of both jnana and karma. This is called jnana karma samuchaya. That means an admixture of both. You perform karma, but with knowledge. That means knowing the nature and purpose of karma. If we perform karma, it may lead us to moksha. That's what the Mimamsaka says. Vidya sahitanam karmanam nitya arambha samarthyam. So that kind of jnana karma samuchaya can bring about that kind of eternal moksha. So will it do? Does the Mimamsaka argue? Now Shankara Bhagavad-pada answers, no. Virodhat. Sorry, this is not possible. Because there is great difference between these two, the knowledge and karma. Nityam cha arabhyate iti viruddham. And another thing is that you say that nityarabdha. That means the jnana karma samuchaya can produce or create that nitya eternal moksha. They can lead to moksha. But he says there is contradiction here. On one side you say that the moksha is eternal, and you say it is produced also. Whatever is produced is non-eternal. That is the basic difference, and that's why on the basis of this contradiction also we cannot accept the jnana karma samuchaya admixture of both jnana and karma. Then what is your theory? Shankara Bhagavad-pada makes it very clear in unequivocal terms everywhere in his bhashya that kevaladeva jnanat mokshaha. So that moksha, that realization is possible only from jnana, and it is not mixed with any other thing. All the other things are only auxiliary, secondary to this. They are supportive to this jnana only, and without getting this realization one cannot attain moksha. Yat vinashtam tadeva notpadyate. So whatever is destroyed, it is not produced. So this is the reason. That's what the Mimamsaka says. Pradvamsa abhavavat nityobi mokshaha arabhyaha eva iti chet. So the Mimamsaka further argues, okay, we have one abhava called pradvamsa abhava. Pradvamsa bhava is something produced, but it is eternal. So this way also, moksha is produced and it can be eternal. What about this logic? Now Shankaracharya says, well, your argument is okay, but some logical fallacy is there. That is, you say that moksha is eternal, it is produced, and you give the example of pradvamsa bhava. Now he says, your logic is faulty for this reason, that in our theory, in the Vedanta theory, mokshasya bhava rupatvat. Moksha is something positive, not negative. And you have given the example of pradvamsa bhava, which is negative. Pradvamsa bhava is absence, that is the post absence, means absence of a particular object after its destruction. That is eternal, okay, we accept. That is produced yet eternal. But the moksha, the liberation, the state is positive, not negative. That's why you cannot give the example of pradvamsa bhava and establish your theory. So on this basis we can conclude that karma cannot yield moksha, or karma cannot lead to moksha. Single karma or karma mixed with jnana, so that also cannot lead us to moksha. So that is the final theory of Advaita. Shankaracharya very logically establishes the theory and says pradvamsa bhava api arabhyate iti na sambhavati. So you cannot say that pradvamsa bhava, that absence also is created. You cannot say that. It is not created. Abhavasya vishesha bhavat vikalpa matram etat. Abhava, absence of something, is vishesha bhava. There is no particularity there. There is no distinction there. Abhava is after all abhava only. And that's why you cannot say that something called pradvamsa bhava is created. It is also wrong. Bhava pratiyogihi abhavaha. Because absence of something has its counterpart, counter positive, the bhava padartha. That means when I say here, there is no book on the table. When book is brought there, that positive book, that particular object, is the counter positive of its absence. And thus, bhava pratiyogi abhavaha. So everywhere naturally, the bhava padartha, something positive, will be the opposite of the absence. When that particular object is brought into existence, then its absence ceases to be there. Yadhahi abhinnopi bhavaha ghata patadibhir visheshyate bhinnaiva ghata bhavaha pata bhavaha iti evam nirvisheshopi abhavaha kriya guna yogat dravyadivat vikalpyate. Now he says, abhinnaha api bhavaha. Actually existence is without any distinction, it is one. Abhinnopi bhavaha ghata patadibhir visheshyate. So though the existence is one, it is only characterized or specified by a particular object called ghata, pata, something called pot, something called cloth, something called book, etc. So all these objects, they actually distinguish that particular single existence. As such, existence is one. Bhavaha nabhidyate. Similarly, nirvisheshopi abhavaha. The abhava, absence, is also nirvishesha. It has no distinction at all. But kriya, guna, yogat, just on account of that particular action, that particular quality or property, it is also distinguished. Now, the logic we should understand very clearly, that absence is also one, like the presence. But the absence is also characterized by that particular kriya, by that particular guna. So here, for example, when somebody says that particular object called pot is destroyed, its pradvamsa bhava is created, Shankaracharya observes that the abhava is one there. And that particular kriya, that means the kriya that is conducive to the destruction of that particular pot, the movement is called pradvamsa bhava. And thus, dravyadivat vikalpyate. So that abhava, though being one, is vikalpyate, is variously stated. Dravyadivat, like any substance, like anything outside. So that's why you cannot say that the pradvamsa bhava is created. Nahi abhavaha utpaladivat visheshana sahabhavi. So a particular thing called lotus. You can say blue lotus, red lotus, white lotus, etc. So various qualities, various colors, various properties are added, and you can distinguish that. But you cannot distinguish abhava like this. That's why the fourfold nature of abhava is also not possible. Thus, Adi Shankaracharya here makes very clear that karma is not cause of moksha. Karma with jnana is also not acceptable in the Vedanta philosophy as cause of moksha. Moksha is possible with only realization of the Brahman. That means self-realization as cosmic reality alone gets us rid of all the impurities, all the sorrows, and we can be one with the Brahman. So that is the essence of this Bhashya, and in the next class we can continue with the remaining part of the Bhashya. Sahana Pavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.